For centuries, history books have fed us a very neat, linear story. We're told that civilization only started in a few specific cradles, like Mesopotamia or the Nile Valley, and that advanced cities and technologies only appeared after a slow, predictable evolution. But we were wrong. Hidden beneath the Amazonian canopy, buried under layers of black earth in Eastern Europe, and carved into the freezing peaks of the Andes, lie lost worlds that shatter everything we thought we knew. These weren't just small, primitive tribes. These were massive urban grids, high-altitude empires, and hyper-connected networks that thrived at a scale we never thought possible. Today, armed with cutting-edge technology, we are finally ripping up the history books. Welcome to the lost chapters of human history. Let's kick things off deep inside the most famous jungle on Earth, the Amazon. For generations, school textbooks fed us a very specific narrative. We were taught that the Amazon rainforest was a pristine, untouched wilderness. We were told that the harsh tropical climate, the heavy seasonal rainfall, and the notoriously acidic soils made it completely impossible for large-scale civilizations to ever take root there. According to standard history, the people who lived in the Amazon were restricted to small nomadic tribes of hunter-gatherers who left almost no permanent mark on the landscape. But as it turns out, we were looking at the jungle all wrong. Because for centuries, the true scale of what was hidden down there was literally blocked from our view by millions of square miles of dense, impenetrable tree canopy. Then came LiDAR. If you haven't heard of it, LiDAR is a revolutionary, remote sensing technology that uses laser pulses shot from airplanes to strip away the digital forest cover, revealing the bare earth underneath. In recent years, researchers pointing these lasers at the Llanos de Mojos region in Bolivian Amazonia discovered something that absolutely stunned the archaeological world: the Casarabe culture. Dating roughly between 500 and 1400 Common Era, this wasn't just a scattering of primitive villages. What the lasers uncovered was a sprawling, low-density urban network. We are talking about massive monumental architecture, including conical pyramids standing over 20 meters tall, surrounded by massive moats, defensive walls, and an intricate grid of elevated causeways stretching for miles across the landscape, connecting distant settlements together. Think about the sheer logistics of that for a moment. To build structures of this magnitude in a tropical environment, you need immense social organization, advanced engineering, and a deep, working understanding of water management. These people weren't just surviving the jungle, they were actively shaping it. And that brings us to the biggest insight of all. The Casarabe culture completely deconstructs what we call environmental determinism. For years, scientists assumed that harsh environments dictate whether a civilization can rise or fall. But the Casarabe people proved that human ingenuity can find a way to build complex, massive societies anywhere. Even more importantly, their discovery shatters the myth of the pristine, untouched Amazon. Long before Europeans ever set foot in South America, the Amazon was already home to massive, complex, and sustainable urban gardens. Proof that early humans could live in harmony with a delicate rainforest ecosystem on an industrial scale without destroying it. It makes you wonder, what else is still hiding out there, completely invisible to the naked eye, just waiting for the right technology to uncover it? Now, let's travel halfway across the world to the fertile river deltas of ancient China. For generations, traditional history taught us a very specific origin story for Chinese civilization. We were told that the first true states and complex societies began along the arid, rolling plains of the Yellow River, places like the Central Plains, where dynasties like the Xia and Shang later rose to power. But deep in the Yangtze River Delta, archaeologists uncovered something that completely rewrote that timeline. Dating back an astonishing 5,300 years, long before China's traditionally recognized first dynasties ever emerged, flourished the Liangzhu culture. Once dismissed as a minor, regional Neolithic group, the excavation of the Liangzhu archaeological site revealed a staggering truth. This wasn't just a collection of farming villages. It was a massive, highly sophisticated state society with urban planning, social hierarchy, and monumental engineering that easily rivaled ancient Egypt or early Mesopotamia. And what makes Liangzhu truly mind-blowing is its hydraulic mastery. Around 3000 BCE, the people of Liangzhu engineered one of the most complex water management systems the ancient world had ever seen. They didn't just build a few simple irrigation ditches. They constructed a massive, highly sophisticated network of giant dams, large reservoirs, and intricate canals that spanned across a massive valley. This colossal hydraulic system served multiple functions at once. It protected their settlements from seasonal floods, allowed for intensive, highly productive rice agriculture, and served as a bustling waterway network for long-distance transport and trade. In fact, engineers today recognize Liangzhu's water system as the earliest known mega-water management network on planet Earth. Just take a moment to absorb that. While most of the ancient world was still figuring out basic village life, the people of Liangzhu were executing large-scale civil engineering projects that required centralized authority, advanced mathematics, and thousands of laborers working in synchronized coordination. And this brings us to the profound insight of the Liangzhu culture. It shatters our traditional understanding of where and how early states are supposed to form. For decades, historians assumed that complex, monumental civilizations required dry, arid river valleys like the Tigris, the Euphrates, or the Nile, where flooding forced people to cooperate under strict control. But Liangzhu proved that state-level complexity could successfully emerge in wet, marshy, river delta environments through sophisticated water control and brilliant environmental adaptation. Furthermore, if you look inside their elite tombs, you find a society deeply defined by art and ideology. The people of Liangzhu produced exquisite, meticulously carved jade artifacts, most notably the mysterious Kong cylinders and bee discs. Carved from hard jade using nothing more than quartz sand and sheer patience, these intricate objects were symbols of absolute power, religious authority, and social stratification, proving that their elite didn't just rule through physical force, but through a shared, deeply rooted spiritual ideology. Liangzhu forces us to look past the usual suspects of world history and recognize that the foundations of human civilization were being built in places we least expected. Now, let's travel all the way to Eastern Europe, deep into the fertile Black Earth regions of modern-day Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. Picture prehistoric Europe around 4000 BCE. If you ask most people what life looked like back then, they'll probably picture small, scattered farming hamlets made of muddy huts where people barely scraped by. Let's completely shatter that image right now. In this exact region, the Cucuteni Trypillia culture built some of the largest settlements in the entire ancient world. Archaeologists refer to them as megasites. These weren't just big villages. These were massive, sprawling urban centers covering areas up to 350 hectares. To put that into perspective, they sometimes housed tens of thousands of people in a single location, rivaling or even exceeding the populations of early Mesopotamian cities that we traditionally call the first true urban centers. But here's where things get genuinely bizarre and fascinating. Despite their massive scale and incredible architectural organization, these megasites had no kings, no palaces, no centralized temples, and no signs of a ruling elite. They were entirely egalitarian. People lived in concentric circles of multi-story timber houses sharing resources and communal spaces in a society built on cooperation rather than authoritarian control. And then there is their most baffling ritual, the Great Burn. Every 60 to 80 years, roughly the span of 2 or 3 generations, the inhabitants of these megasites would do something unthinkable. They would systematically empty their homes, pack up their belongings, and burn their entire city completely to the ground. Then they would move just a short distance away and build an entirely new megasite from scratch, repeating the exact same cycle all over again. Just imagine the immense collective labor required to build a city for 20,000 people, only to intentionally set it on fire and walk away. Why did they do it? Was it a sanitary measure? A spiritual purification ritual? A way to prevent permanent social inequality from taking root? Archaeologists still debate the exact reasons, but the sheer commitment to this cycle is breathtaking. And this brings us to the profound insights of the Cucuteni Trypillia culture. First, it completely shatters the old historical dogma that massive urban centers require a king, an army, or a steep social hierarchy to exist. They prove that thousands of people could organize at a massive scale through pure community consensus. Second, their cyclical destruction of cities forces us to rethink our modern obsession with permanent, endless growth. For the Cucuteni Trypillia people, progress wasn't about building monuments that lasted forever. It was about renewal, community balance, and starting fresh. They left behind no royal tombs or golden treasures, but they left us a massive question mark about what human society could, and perhaps should, look like. Now, let's pack our bags and head up into the freezing, rugged mountain peaks of Central Asia. When most people think of the legendary Silk Road, that ancient web of trade routes connecting east and west, they picture flat, scorching desert landscapes. We think of famous, low-elevation oasis cities like Samarkand or Bukhara, where merchants traded spices, silk, and gold under the burning desert sun. We never imagined a major, bustling metropolis thriving at nearly 2,200 meters above sea level, nestled deep inside the freezing, oxygen-thin mountain passes of the Tian Shan Range in modern-day Uzbekistan. But that is exactly what archaeologists recently discovered, a lost high-altitude city known as Tashbulak. Discovered through cutting-edge satellite remote sensing and drone mapping, Tashbulak was a thriving medieval city that flourished between the 6th and 11th centuries Common Era. Just picture the sheer harshness of this environment for a moment. Up at this elevation, winters are brutally cold, oxygen is thin, the terrain is impossibly steep, and arable land is scarce. By all modern logic, no one should have been able to build a city here. Yet, the people of Tashbulak did not just survive, they engineered a thriving urban center. The city boasted hundreds of permanent stone and earth structures, fortified citadels protecting its borders, bustling marketplaces, and specialized industrial areas. In fact, archaeological excavations revealed massive iron smelting workshops, showing that this high-altitude city was actually a major industrial powerhouse, churning out metal tools and weapons for travelers crossing the mountains. And this leads us to the two most profound insights of Tashbulak. First, it completely shatters our traditional geographical assumptions about where major urban centers can exist. For generations, historians believed that large cities required low-elevation, agriculturally rich river basins to sustain their populations. Tashbulak proves that human ingenuity can conquer extreme alpine environments, turning hostile, frozen mountain peaks into thriving hubs of civilization. Second, it fundamentally redefines how we understand the Silk Road network. The Silk Road was never just a collection of flat desert trails. It was a complex, multi-tiered, three-dimensional ecosystem where mountain nomads, high-altitude industrialists, and lowland merchants were all deeply interconnected. Tashbulak reminds us that whenever humans found a path across the map, no matter how high, cold, or unforgiving, they found a way to build a world. Now, let's cross the Atlantic and travel high up into the misty, vertical wilderness of the Peruvian Andes. When people talk about ancient civilizations in South America, our minds instantly jump to the Incas. We picture the majestic heights of Machu Picchu, the royal roads, and a massive empire that stretched across the mountains. But long before the Incan Empire ever rose to power, a completely different, fiercely independent group of people inhabited these very same peaks. They were known as the Chachapoya, the warriors of the clouds. Living between 800 Common Era and the arrival of the Spanish conquest, the Chachapoya built their civilization in the Ceja de Selva, the eyebrow of the jungle. This is a region where the eastern slopes of the Andes crash directly into the Amazon basin. It is a world of endless mist, vertical cliffs, torrential rain, and dense cloud forests. By all normal standards of human geography, this terrain is completely uninhabitable. You can't farm easily, you can't build on sheer rock faces, and the constant moisture makes daily life a relentless battle against nature. Yet, the Chachapoya didn't just survive here. They conquered the verticality. They built breathtaking stone citadels perched perilously on dizzying precipices. The most famous of these is Cucuteni, a massive monumental fortress surrounded by towering stone walls up to 20 meters high, looking out over a breathtaking sea of clouds. To build something of this scale on the side of a sheer mountain cliff required profound architectural genius, precise stone masonry, and an unbreakable willpower. But perhaps even more fascinating and haunting is how they handled their dead. The Chachapoya didn't bury their ancestors underground. Instead, they built cliffside mausoleums and sarcophagi perched dramatically on the edges of sheer vertical drops, hundreds of feet above the valley floor. Sites like the sarcophagi of Casarabe feature giant, clay-covered human figures standing guard side by side on impossible rock ledges, watching over the valleys for eternity. They defied gravity and nature itself, ensuring that their ancestors remained active, watchful protectors of the community, even in death. And this brings us to the profound insights of the Chachapoya. First, they completely redefine our relationship with topography. They prove that steep, vertical, hostile mountain environments are not impassable barriers. They can be transformed into brilliant defensive fortresses and spiritual strongholds. Second, their history challenges the old historical narrative that the Andes were a monolithic empire dominated entirely by the Incas. The Chachapoya remind us that South America was actually a rich, diverse tapestry of distinct, fiercely independent cultures, each finding uniquely genius ways to master their own corner of the earth. The warriors of the clouds didn't just build stone walls, they built a legacy that literally touches the sky. Now, let's cross the Atlantic once again and head deep into the savanna and gallery forests of central Nigeria, in West Africa. When standard history books talk about the origins of complex art and advanced metallurgy in the ancient world, they usually point straight to the Mediterranean, the Near East, or Asia. For a very long time, mainstream academia operated under a deeply Eurocentric assumption that advanced ironworking technology and sophisticated sculpture making were skills that had to be invented elsewhere and slowly diffused into Africa from the outside. Then came the Nok culture. Flourishing from around 1500 BCE well into the first millennium CE, the Nok culture completely shattered those outdated diffusion models. They emerged as an absolute artistic and technological powerhouse right in the heart of West Africa. If you have ever set eyes on a Nok terracotta sculpture, you will never forget it. These are breathtaking, highly stylized ceramic figures depicting human beings with distinctive, pierced triangular eyes, parted lips, elaborate geometric hairstyles, and sophisticated jewelry. They possess an intense emotional expression, a striking blend of solemnity and raw life. But the true significance of the Nok culture goes far beyond their stunning art. Beneath the soil, archaeologists discovered something that changed the history of technology forever. The Nok people were master metallurgists. Long before iron-working techniques were ever thought to have arrived in sub-Saharan Africa from external sources, the Nok were already smelting iron with remarkable efficiency. They engineered advanced pyrotechnology, building sophisticated furnaces capable of reaching the extreme temperatures required to extract iron from rock, forging durable tools and weapons that revolutionized agriculture and warfare across the region. Furthermore, recent excavations have revealed that Nok communities weren't just scattered homesteads. They lived in large, complex, highly organized settlements that eventually grew into dense urban clusters, featuring specialized labor, trade networks, and shared cultural traditions across a massive geographic area. And this brings us to the profound insights of the Nok culture. First, they provide definitive proof of independent technological innovation in sub-Saharan Africa. The Nok didn't need anyone to teach them how to smelt iron or master the kiln. They pioneered these complex industries entirely on their own, driven by local necessity and brilliant engineering. Second, their incredible artwork serves as a powerful window into social complexity. It proves that the Nok society was deeply stratified, featuring specialized craft guilds, a shared spiritual identity, and a rich cultural life long before written records ever documented the region. The Nok culture reminds us that human genius is truly universal, flourishing brightly anywhere people have the vision to shape the earth and fire the clay. Now, let's wrap up our journey by heading into one of the most hostile, unforgiving environments on planet Earth, the hyper-arid heart of the Sahara Desert. When most people think of the Sahara, we picture an endless, burning ocean of golden sand dunes, a desolate wasteland where no major civilization could ever possibly take root, let alone build a powerful, thriving empire. Yet, 2,000 years ago, the Fezzan region of southwestern Libya, deep in the middle of this punishing wasteland, was home to a formidable, wealthy, and technologically brilliant society, the Garamantes. Flourishing from roughly 500 Common Era back to the ancient world, the Garamantes built a massive, highly organized civilization complete with fortified desert cities, monumental stone castles, and bustling commercial trade routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa directly to the Roman Empire. But the biggest question hanging over their entire history is a staggering one. How on earth did they manage to survive and build an empire in a desert that had virtually no surface water? The answer lies in one of the most incredible engineering feats of the ancient world: the Fagaras. Recognizing that they couldn't rely on rare rainfall, the Garamantes looked beneath their feet. They engineered a massive, ingenious network of underground, hand-dug tunnels stretching for thousands of kilometers through solid rock and sand. These subterranean aqueducts tapped directly into fossil water aquifers buried deep beneath the desert floor. Using the natural slope of the land, gravity pulled this precious water for miles without a single pump, channeling it right to their parched agricultural fields, gardens, and cities. Just imagine the immense physical labor required to dig thousands of kilometers of dark, suffocating underground tunnels beneath the scorching Saharan sun. It required supreme mathematical precision, communal coordination, and a deep understanding of hydrology. And this brings us to the profound insights of the Garamantes. First, they completely rewrite our understanding of the Sahara Desert. They prove that the Sahara was never an impenetrable, dead barrier that separated different parts of the world. Instead, it was a dynamic, living highway of trade, innovation, and vibrant culture. Second, the Garamantes shatter the traditional historical dogma that powerful, complex states can only emerge near major rivers or fertile coastlines like the Nile, the Tigris, or the Mediterranean. They prove that human ingenuity can unlock life in the most barren, extreme landscapes on Earth, turning a deadly wasteland into a flourishing home. The Garamantes teach us that when humans refuse to accept the limits imposed by nature, they can literally move water through the desert and rewrite the history of what is possible. History is not a finished book. It is an ongoing excavation. For generations, we viewed human progress through a narrow lens, assuming that true civilization only happened in a few approved places, following a strict, predictable script. But as we've seen today, human history is infinitely more diverse, resilient, and inventive than our textbooks ever admitted. From the engineered rainforests of the Amazon and the high-altitude industrial hubs of the Silk Road to the subterranean desert canals of the Sahara, these 7 lost civilizations teach us a profound lesson. Human ingenuity has no single blueprint. And if 7 hidden civilizations could rewrite what we thought we knew about the past, imagine how many more are still waiting out there in the dark. History is waiting. Subscribe for more.